Hello friends, good to see you again. I've been missing you like crazy. I really wish we could have this time together, but as you know by now, the world has kind of stopped. Everything's sort of upside down here, so this is just kind of how we have to go forward here on out. I am hoping that in a few weeks we can get back together in our classroom and interact as human beings again. Kind of judging by the way things are going, it sort of looks like we may not be back this school year. We'll see. If that's the case, then I will see you through to the end. We're going to get through this together. It's going to be fine. Don't worry. Obviously, we are not in our classroom. Instead, I am coming at you from my home office with my weird wall of creepy behind me, all my little souvenirs and treasures over the years. This is just where we're going to be working, but it's kind of cool not having to drive to school. You can just be in pajamas in your bed, and I just get to come upstairs and I'm at work. So, the school has told us that they don't want any new work until after March 28th. They're trying to kind of put a freeze on everything just so some classes don't get ahead of others. But I know that you do have some work at home that you need to get to me. So I don't think there's anything wrong with accepting work you've already done. So we're going to try and get caught up a little bit. We're going to get to where we need to be here. And since I'm not collecting any brand new work until next week, we'll use this week as sort of a practice week, just getting used to Canvas, how to find it, how to find all of the projects and assignments that I'll be putting on there. Don't expect to find our entire course online. I'm just going to be doing a little bit at a time because I'm still learning this. Some of you will have to be learning this as well, and we're going to help each other. It's going to be fine. I'm just an email away always, so don't worry about feeling anxious or being left alone. We're going to be okay. We're going to do this. I am not a tech person, and if I can learn to do this, I know you can do it too, and we're here to support each other. So we'll use this week just to maybe send in Essay 1, just kind of get used to what this is going to look like from now on. We are used to coming to class twice a week for a couple of hours each class period. Obviously, our nice controlled little structure is just sort of blown to pieces right now. So we're not going to be working that way. So I'm thinking what I will probably do is at the start of each week, I will post a new video or two, maybe another reading assignment, maybe something that you'll need to submit to me, and it'll just be available for the week, and that will be our classes for the week. And then the following weekend, I'll post up the next week and the next group of assignments. So we will still get the work done that I was always planning to do with you. A few things I'm going to take off the table. Obviously, we're not going to do vocabulary tests, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. But as far as the reading, we can still do our book talks this way. You can still submit your essays and everything else through Canvas. So the most important stuff will still be able to get in, and that will add up to the points that you need for the semester. So we'll do it. We can do this. The nice thing about Canvas is you can submit all of your work using that system, and I'll be able, for example, to pull up your essay on Canvas. I can go through and make corrections to it. I can give you feedback just like I would with my trusty pen. Give you a grade and send it back to you, I believe. I would imagine I could get my work back to you. And Canvas will keep track of your grades for you. It kind of generates an automatic grade book there. So at any time in the semester, you can look at your work and kind of see how you're doing. You don't have to wait to ask me for that. So in some ways, it does make things a little bit easier, I guess. But before you turn in your essay, which we'll do at the end of the week, so you still have plenty of time, because I want to use today, our first little video lecture here, to talk to you about the most important punctuation that you need in your writing. This is what I was going to talk to you about the day that we were suddenly canceled. So I want to show you those tiny details that really make all the difference in your writing. And at the end of this video, we're going to do sort of a self-peer review. that's an important part of the process that I'm really sorry to see go. I really wish we could do this part in person, but obviously we can't. And the instructors who are teaching me how to use Canvas, who are giving us all the training, have said that the peer review function on Canvas is kind of complicated. It's a little cumbersome, not the easiest thing in the world to use. It's okay. I'm still going to show you all the things that, as your professor, I'm looking for in your writing, so you can reread your work and make sure you see those things that I'm going to be looking for. So we're not going to have multiple drafts to turn in. You're just going to have, from now on, just one nice, complete final draft that you're going to submit to me on Canvas whenever an essay is due. But again, I'm going to work with you just like I promised I would. Through all of your essays. I will post sample projects online, so you'll still be able to see how things work and what a finished essay should look like depending on what we're doing at the time. And I obviously will still communicate with you through the remind system, through email. I can send out mass emails now and then too, just to clarify information. But that's what our class is going to look like from now on. So let me go ahead and get started with this punctuation piece that I wanted to talk to you about. Like I said, I'm not going to drown you in grammar this semester. This is probably one of the last times I'm going to really probably talk about grammar. Because most of it you probably already know and are somewhat comfortable with. So I just want to give you a review of the most important pieces that you're going to use in your everyday writing for the rest of your life. Really, no matter your career, no matter what class you're taking, this is the stuff you really, really need to know. So let me show you. All right, you can see I got my whiteboard. Bought myself a whiteboard and put that up there. So cute. Oh my God. By the way, if you hear any weird noises in the background, on the other side of this door is a bathroom. And on the other side of that is a playroom where my kids are playing video games right now and just being loud as hell. So sorry, just try and ignore that. Everyone is home with me. Everyone's home with me. Everybody is home with me. When you invite a reader into your work, your sentences guide them along like a smoothly paved highway, and you're moving them swiftly and easily from the hook in your first paragraph to your final concluding statements. And you want that ride for your passengers to be as smooth and comfortable as possible. And in order to do that, your sentences need to be complete thoughts. But you also need proper punctuation to string them together. Sometimes students sort of rebel against punctuation and they think it really doesn't matter, it's not important. But good grammar absolutely does matter. It's very important, and I'm going to show you why it matters. This first slide here I did not make this up. This was submitted to me by a student, so just to kind of read this along with you. The last time I was at the beach, I saw a gorgeous, and I do mean beautiful, sunset. The shimmering colors of aquamarines, peach, and, let me think, I guess I'll call it lavender. They danced together on whitecaps beautifully. Watching nature's artistry made my... Now see, we've even stopped using language at this point. We're not even into words anymore. Watching nature's artistry made my heart smile quietly. It really did. I hate this person. I hate this person. If you turned in work that looks like this, I'll find you. I'll come to you, and you're going to open your front door of your house, and I won't even say anything. I'll just punch you. I'm just going to punch you in the teeth. That's all. If we look at this again, there is so much wrong here. We have commas thrown in here for absolutely no purpose. There are too many pauses that cause us to stall when we're reading, that kind of cause us to stop and start over and over again. Those 3 periods in between her words, she's telling us that she's literally thinking on paper. She's putting pauses in between her words as she's trying to think of the next thing to say. Don't do that. Don't do that. You can see that for some reason Whitecaps, which is not anyone's name or place or proper noun, She has those capitalized for reasons that are beyond my understanding. Same with artistry. There's no reason to capitalize words that don't need to be capitalized. And again, down at the end, she's just given up on the English language altogether and she's using pictures. Don't text me your essays. I want real, honest-to-goodness essays. And let's compare this to a rewritten paragraph. Let me show you what one looks like. I took her work and just cleaned it up a little bit. So here's what that looks like. The last time I was at the beach, I saw a gorgeous sunset. The shimmering colors of aquamarine, peach, and lavender danced together on the whitecaps in a beautiful display of light. Watching nature's artistry made my heart smile quietly. I love that person. I like that person there. Words are properly capitalized. The ideas run together really seamlessly and the imagery is crystal clear. In fact, when you have details and descriptions that work this well together, your brain starts to automatically fill in other details that can go with it. You could almost hear the sound of the ocean, or feel the mist of the salt water kind of spraying you, or that sweet coconut smell of suntan lotion, right? Give your reader some good, strong details, and their brain is going to fill in some more. They're going to fill in the rest. And you can see the difference is all in the punctuation here. And that's the secret of good grammar. It disappears. Obviously, it's there. You can see the commas, you can see the periods, you can see the words that are properly capitalized, at the start of new sentences there. You can sort of compare this to a really good meal you've eaten. If you have a really good chocolate cake, for example, I love chocolate cake. If it's made properly, you don't taste the flour, you don't taste the oil, you don't taste the eggs in it, right? You taste the cake in all its completeness. The individual ingredients are there, the pieces are there, but they fade in, they blend in together. And good grammar does the same thing. It is very much there, it is present, but it's in the background. And if it does its job well, you don't notice it. All right, the first one that we are going to start with is the most obvious. This is our period. Now, you already know that the period goes at the end of your sentences. So let's see what this looks like. Let's apply this to a common mistake I see with student writers. In a sentence like this, I enjoy my English and history classes, I don't like math. All right, we've already identified this as a run-on sentence. We talked about that in class. And the first thing you want to do is to identify where we take a break. Where would we naturally want to take a breath or sort of end this thought? And that would be after the word. And by looking at this, we know that everything that comes before the star and after the star are independent phrases. Each one of those statements are fine all by themselves, exactly the way they are. Now, when we see something like this, we know that our first temptation is to stick a comma between classes and I. A lot of students think that is enough of a fix. However, when you have two back-to-back independent sentences like this, you need a little bit more there. Those sentences are still a little bit too smashed together. And I'll show you what I mean. All right, I have a couple of toys here, some toy trains here. Think of each one of these train cars as an independent sentence. Each one of these is complete all by itself. Right? At the back of one is a hook, and in the beginning of the other is a loop. And the hook and the loops keep our trains from going too far apart, but also not being smashed together. They keep the perfect amount of space here. If we just throw a comma in between these, they're kind of smashed together. It's not going to work. So we need a little bit more separation. We need a little bit more there. So for our sentence here, we need a hook and a loop. And we talked about those helpful words, those fanboys. So if we go back to our example, we can figure out how exactly to finish this sentence off. All right, so we have a contrast here. And in between these two, the first half is saying that you enjoy those two classes. The second half is saying, but I don't like this one. And a good word for that would probably be but. Right, so this is an effective way of putting together two independent phrases. You need a comma plus one of our helper words thrown in there. But we're talking about periods right now. So let's go back to our original example. Here's what's nice about independent sentences. If you don't want to string them together, you don't have to, because each one of those is fine all by itself. So if you're not sure how to fix it, when in doubt, just throw in a period there and you are done. A period marks the end of a complete thought. You have a complete sentence. What about this example? This is a simple phrase. Is today Monday? Period. You know that's probably not correct, because we need something a little bit more than a period right here. We need a question mark. Right? This is a direct question. This person is seeking an answer. But what about this? How about this example? He asked if today is Monday. And we have a question mark at the end of that. That isn't correct, because this person isn't asking a direct question. They're not seeking an answer here. They're simply sort of summarizing what someone else said. So this is not a question. So in this example, that little guy there is all you need. It is not a direct question. I'm going to give you one last thing with periods. Victor Frankenstein is the true villain of the story. And there's an exclamation point there at the end of that. Unless you're shouting, there's no use for exclamation points in academic writing. In fact, from this point forward, I want you to sort of strike this from your writing toolkit. The use of the exclamation point, it sort of looks cartoony, a little amateurish. We really don't use that in our writing anymore. Just use a period. That's really the safest punctuation you can use to end your sentences. Now, if you're quoting a character from a story, for example, Edgar Allan Poe, his characters often used exclamation points because they were always so breathless and frantic and nervous. So if you're quoting a text and that uses an exclamation point, that is totally fine. But for your own writing, for your own personal statements, make sure and just kind of get used to not really using that. All right, our next little important VIP punctuation here is the comma. And you can see I made a little note there. That goes down below. That goes on the bottom of our word line. And we use these to separate or to put little pauses in our statements. For whatever reason, students absolutely love the comma. They think it does more than it really does. Now, it does serve 4 really important functions, and I'm going to show you really quickly what those 4 things are. Obviously here, the first is to separate or to pause. Here's what that looks like. All right, like we already mentioned before, we use these to separate our independent phrases. I like math, but, there's the helper word, I like English more. So this is a good separation here, a good little pause between the ideas. Let me show you what this looks like with a dependent clause, with a fragment attached to it. All right, in my next example, it says, being a sugar freak, I drink soda every day. The part underlined in red is my independent sentence. I drink soda every day. It's complete. It's just fine by itself. But that first part, being a sugar freak, if I just wrote those 4 words on the board, being a sugar freak, you have no idea what I mean. That's a fragment, and so we have to attach it to something independent. We have to attach it to something stronger. So, being a sugar freak, comma, I drink soda every day. The nice thing about fragments is they're sort of like Lego bricks. If you don't like how one sentence is set up, you can tear it down and build it up another way. You can switch it around if you wanted to. You can say, I drink soda every day because I'm a sugar freak. So that part in blue, you can move that around. That's sort of interchangeable, as long as you have something independent to attach it to. Of course, right now, my next door neighbor decided to start doing some yard work, so you're going to hear a lawnmower in the background. I'm so sorry, just try and hopefully you can hear me over that noise. Anyway, the second thing we use commas most often for is to list items. So if you have a grocery list, let's say it would look something like this. All right, so your sample shopping list might say, I need to buy cheese, comma, milk, comma, butter, comma, and toilet paper. Now, things have changed over time. There's something called the MLA, it's the Modern Language Association, and for whatever reason, they are based in Sweden, and they decide, or Switzerland, one of those countries, and they decide how the rest of the world uses the English language. And they have decided, and some of you might be used to doing it this way, but they have decided that you no longer need that last comma between the last two items of a list. So they say that you don't need that last one anymore. And if that's how you were raised doing it, that's absolutely fine. I would not mark that wrong on a paper if you were raised by dropping that last comma there. However, I still use it. That last little comma is called the Oxford comma. And I still like to use it because my eye likes that little bit of separation. Alright, so you can see that I put that back. I put that comma back in there just because I like it. I like to see the items separated nice and neatly. And the other reason it's not such a bad idea to keep using that Oxford comma is because our language is very literal. And what I mean is what you write can be confused for misinterpretation. When you write something, your goal is to be as clear as possible. But if you leave off that last comma, there's a way of messing that up. And I'm going to show you right now what that can look like. Alright, if you look at this example, this is a student who doesn't like to use that last comma. So here's how their sentence sounds. I had a party and invited 2 strippers, my mom and my dad. Now, obviously, they meant to say that they invited 4 people to their party. 2 strippers in addition to their mom and their dad. But without that comma there, listen to it again. I had a party and invited 2 strippers, my mom and my dad. It sounds like I invited my parents over to take off their clothes and entertain my guests. So that's what I mean. Our language is very, very literal, and it likes to make sure that it is understood completely. So this is why I like that last comma. Here's what it would look like if I had written this. So I added in my last comma, and now it sounds completely different. I had a party and invited 2 strippers, my mom, and my dad. Now there's absolutely no confusion that my guest list consisted of 4 people. I would never invite those 4 people together, but there you go. Now it makes more sense. Alright, number 3 with commas, we use them to introduce. This is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Anytime you have an introductory statement, you follow it with a comma. It's sort of a pause where you take a breath in order to introduce your next point, your next talking point. For example, comma, finally, however, in conclusion, and anytime you introduce a quote from a character or a person, you would write, he said, comma, followed by the quote that the person said. So we use commas for introductory statements to introduce ideas and character quotes. And finally, number 4, the last way that we generally use commas is to interject or to interrupt. And that sounds kind of funny, but yes, there is a way that you can interrupt your own sentence to include some more detail. Let me show you what that looks like. Alright, so when you interrupt your own work, you use the commas there as sort of bookends, and you sort of squeeze in some extra details in the middle of your sentence. So here's what this looks like. Jason, tired and hungry, got home from work. That fragment that I have underlined in red, we can just squeeze right into the middle of your complete sentence. And the reason for that is if we were to take out that middle section, we are still left with a complete sentence. Jason got home from work. And that would be a complete sentence all by itself. But that extra little bit in the middle is just some additional detail. Just to make it clear, I put it back in a different color, just so you can see again, that red piece in the middle is just additional information that we decided to interject into the middle of our sentence. It's just extra detail. It creates a clearer, more vivid picture of Jason, this poor guy, and what he's going through. Alright, this next punctuation is probably, it's a weird thing to say, is my favorite one. This is the semicolon. That's down there on that yellow card. And I like it because it's not quite sure what it wants to be. Is it a period? Is it a comma? Well, I don't know. It's a semicolon. It's a really great subtle punctuation mark to use, but you have to be very careful with it. I drew on the board a set of scales, and in order to use the semicolon, think of it like a scale, and it has to be evenly proportioned on either side. Some students throw this in all the time, trying to use it as either a comma or a period, and it doesn't quite work that way. You have to have balance on either side of this thing. And I'll show you the two very, very specific rules that you have to follow in order to use this. Alright, in this example we have I love pizza, she loves hamburgers. And the semicolon in between there sort of replaces a helper word. The thing about the semicolon is it's slightly weaker than a period, but a little bit stronger than a comma. It's kind of this weird in-between thing. But in this case it works because both sides of this semicolon are related ideas. They're both ideas pertaining to the same topic. How about this next example? In the example on the bottom we have dogs make the best pets, semicolon. My sons love Halloween. This doesn't quite work because the ideas on either side of the semicolon have absolutely nothing to do with each other. They're completely unrelated. So in that example, if you go back to thinking of this like a set of scales, then they just tipped over. They are super imbalanced right now. So the top example works because the ideas on either side are related. The example on the bottom fails because those two statements on either side of the semicolon have absolutely nothing to do with one another. And the other hard and fast rule that we have to abide by when using semicolons is that both sides of it must contain complete independent sentences. I'll show you what I mean. Alright, in this example, I went to see a scary movie, semicolon. The show was sold out. Both of those sentences there, underlined in blue, are independent, complete sentences. If I erase either one of them, you're still left with a complete thought. So the scales are balanced, and this works just fine. What about this? In the example on the bottom we have, since I work at the college, semicolon, I get discounts on books. This does not work. And that's because either side of the semicolon is not balanced. One of these phrases is complete, the other one is not. The second half of this, I get discounts on books, that is a complete sentence. But if you look at everything before the semicolon, since I work at the college, if I just gave you that part, since I work at the college, there's a pause there. We have no idea what's coming next. We don't know what that means. So students sometimes make this mistake of using the semicolon as a comma, but that doesn't work right because the other side is a fragment. So the one on top works. We did that successfully. The one on the bottom does not work because it is not balanced. It is not constructed correctly. All right, I know I know this is very exciting. This is the last one. I hate to disappoint you. This is the last major of the most important punctuation marks I want you to be familiar with because I see a lot of mistakes with this one. This is the apostrophe, which looks a lot like the comma that we talked about, except this one goes above the words. And apostrophes work in one of two ways. The first way we use these is with contractions. And you've seen this before. This is when we take two words and kind of smash them together. And the apostrophe is kind of a big signal to us that this is what we've done. We've put two words together. So do not becomes don't, cannot becomes can't, she is becomes she's. The last one could have becomes could have with the VE there. A lot of students make a certain mistake with this one. A lot of students think that could have is could of, OF. And that is not correct, although it sounds correct because when we're just speaking sort of, casually with each other, really informally, it sounds like we're saying could of, but we're really saying could have. So if you ever go to sort of formally write it out in your essay for whatever reason, it is could have, and the thing that gives it away is the VE at the end. That's have, not of. And of course the other way that we use apostrophes is to show possession or ownership. I have a couple of examples up here because where you put the apostrophe is really important. As tiny as this punctuation mark is, it really has kind of a heavy job to do. If you look at the first example, the boys' books, apostrophe S. Whenever the apostrophe goes before the S, you are talking about one person or one thing. So again, when the apostrophe is before the S, I am talking about one boy in that top example. In the bottom example, the boys' books, you can see there that the apostrophe is after the S. Now what that means is I'm talking about the books that belong to just the boys only. So the books that belong to all of the boys. There's more than one kid there. And where I place my apostrophe gives us this information. So in this example, the children's room, where would you put the apostrophe here? Before the S or after the S? Well, based on the rule I just gave you, your first gut reaction would probably be to put the apostrophe after the S, since we're talking about children, more than one kid, right? However, this would be incorrect. So this is kind of a trick question because English is rarely 100%. Sometimes there's a little room in there for little changes, a little bit of wiggle room there. And this is one of those situations where you follow the rule 99% of the time. But then there's that 1% where, I don't know, whoever decides these things decided, no, we're going to screw with you and we're going to make things a little tricky. In this case, you would put the apostrophe before the S because the word children itself already means more than one. So you don't have to give that apostrophe any double duty there. Just put it right before the S and you are done. All right, that one can be a little confusing, so I just threw in another quick little example there. The women's rights movement. Since the word women ending in M-E-N already means more than one, you just do apostrophe S. All right, here's another example where we're dealing with more than one noun. How do you think you would correct this? How would you use your apostrophes and S's here? If you're going to the home that belongs to Ray and Deborah, how would you punctuate this sentence? Would you say, I'm going to Ray's and Deborah's house? Or would you say, I'm going to Ray and Deborah's house? Where would you put your S here, do you think? In this example, I'm going to put the apostrophe S after Deborah's name. And that's because the house belongs to both of them, so I can treat Ray and Deborah as one subject. I'm going to make them one noun phrase. They become one thing. So you would say, I am going to Ray and Deborah's house. What about this next example? All right, what about this phrase? I clipped John and Rigo fingernails. All right, well, based on the first example, you probably want to put my two kids together and say John and Rigo's fingernails. The problem is, if you do the same thing below to what you did to the example above, it makes it sound like John and Rigo, my two boys, share the same fingernails, like there's some freakish circus monster that's kind of joined at the fingernails. In this case, because I'm talking about the fingernails that belong to two different people, I would punctuate these separately. So this makes a lot more sense. I clipped John's and Rigo's fingernails. I clipped the fingernails that belong to each of my two little boys. All right, here's another little pro tip from me to you. Whenever someone's name ends in an S, all you have to do is stick an apostrophe at the end of their name to show ownership, even though you're talking about just one person. So we have Moses Sandals and Dennis Keys. Now I know saying that out loud, that's probably not what we would normally do. It kind of sounds funny, but technically this is correct. However, if that looks and sounds funny to you, you can always do apostrophe S. Moses's sandals, Dennis's keys. That's how I would do it. I would do it the way on the bottom just because my eye likes the separation and it just feels better to me to do it that way. But technically, either way is absolutely correct. So it's kind of your choice there, whichever way you want to do it. Now, like I just said, nothing in English, very, very rarely is anything in English 100%. So here's another one of those weird little changes to the rules that I just gave you. Whenever you're talking about pronouns like hers, ours, yours, theirs, those are words that replace nouns, you do not need an apostrophe to show ownership. Let me show you a couple of examples. All Right, there's a couple of sentences down there. That purse is hers. And the next one says, theirs is the nicest house. Since I'm using pronouns, hers and theirs, I don't need to use an apostrophe to show ownership. I don't know why that is, but that MLA decided that when you're talking about pronouns, you just don't need punctuation to show it. Let me give you a little tricky example. All right, that sentence there on the board, the snake flashed its fangs at us. Is that correct to you? Hopefully you said no. We don't know if the snake is a boy or girl, so when we don't know the sex of what it is we're talking about, like in this case with an animal, you would treat the it as a pronoun. If I were to leave the apostrophe like this is what this really says right here. If you leave the apostrophe, what you're really saying is the snake flashed its fangs at us. That's a contraction, so that is not correct. All right, the word it is referring to the snake. The snake flashed its fangs at us. We're talking about the fangs that belong to the animal, so that it is a pronoun. You don't need the apostrophe. There is one hard and fast rule here I can give you about apostrophes. We never use them for plural nouns. In other words, you don't need to use an apostrophe to show that there's more than one of something. You simply add an S. For example, I love visiting the Halloween stores that pop up every fall, and I usually go I go and visit them like the day after Halloween just so I can buy up as much as I can for really cheap. And I always see a sign like this, masks 50% off, and it drives me nuts. The teacher in me wants to go and like fix all their little signs all around the store. They're just talking about their inventory of masks, more than one mask. They don't need that apostrophe there. So just cross that out whenever you want to show more than one of anything. In most cases, you simply add an S or ES. All right, friends, that was what I wanted to show you before the school got closed down on us. I just wanted to do a very brief review of the most important grammar and punctuation marks that you're going to use in your writing for this essay, for every essay you do, for me and for any instructor. And these are the things that you're going to be using probably throughout the rest of your professional life. Like I said earlier, I was also going to use that last day that got canceled on us to do a peer review where we were going to sit in groups and pass your rough drafts around in order to get some feedback and have other people kind of comb through your paper and maybe find mistakes that you perhaps missed. Obviously, we don't have that luxury right now, and I'm really disappointed because it's one of my favorite things to do. I feel it's a really important part of the process, and we're not going to be able to do that. So you're not going to be sending me multiple drafts of anything. Whenever papers are due during this time apart, you will just be submitting to me your final draft, your most polished, beautiful looking, professional, nice and clean draft that you can possibly do. But the same rules apply. If you submit a paper and you end up getting a D or lower, I'm still going to give you a chance to revise and resubmit it. So the rules stay the same. I still want you to succeed, so I'm not going to change that. That's going to stay the same. So instead, I'm just simply going to show you what I would look for in a peer review, what I'm going to be looking for as your professor. Because these are things you can do at home to ensure that you're turning in the best quality work that you know how to do. I know that you might be concerned about your ability to read your own work and get it as good as you want it to be. I know you're not an expert. I don't expect you to be, so set some realistic expectations for yourself. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. As college students, though, you do have some basic experience. You do have some basic knowledge that you can apply to your essay, and I'm going to help you find what to look for. I know when I was a college student, I had a really bad habit of printing out my work and just sticking it in my binder or submitting it to a teacher, and then I was done. I would really suggest that after you print out your paper, just let it sit. Let it sit there. Go eat dinner. Go watch TV, go do something else, go look for toilet paper wherever you can find it. Then, after you take a break, come back to your paper and reread it. The reason that's important is because if you print out your work or if you're reading it on the screen, You are more likely to miss little mistakes because as you're reading, your brain is filling everything in for you. You know what you meant to say because it's still fresh on your mind. But if you print it out and leave it alone, let it breathe, let it sit there and mellow like a fine wine, then when you come back to it, you're more likely, in fact, according to brain research, you're 6 times more likely to find mistakes if you let your work just kind of rest and come back to it later. Something else you can do, I know this sounds odd, is to read your paper backwards. Now, I don't mean read the sentences backwards, like the words in reverse order, because that makes no sense. But read your sentences, starting with your last one, going all the way back to your intro. If you read your complete sentences in reverse order instead of going from beginning to end, but read your essay from ending to beginning, you're kind of tripping up your brain. You're forcing yourself to slow down so that you can find some of those mistakes also a little bit easier. Even if English was not your first language, there are still sort of the big ticket items you can look for. So I'm going to show you the big stuff first. Right, first and foremost, the easiest things generally to find are spelling errors. If you were typing along and your computer didn't catch this mistake, you probably most likely meant to type the word the. Something else you want to consider too, something that's really obvious and always surprises me, is sometimes students will turn in papers with the names of the characters or even the names of the stories or authors misspelled. Come on, friends, there is no excuse for that because the work is right in front of you. So take that extra time to make sure that you are spelling things like story titles correctly. In a sentence like this, the defendant across the room guilty of murder. If you just read it like that, it's a fragment, right? You've introduced the defendant who is guilty of murder, but there's no action there. What are you saying about them? Well, in something like this, they probably left off, or you probably left off one simple word. If you throw in the little helper word that you forgot, the defendant across the room is guilty of murder. Now you have a complete thought, and it was as simple as throwing in that one word that you forgot to add because you got to working really, really quickly. Which is an easy mistake to do because we usually speak at about 100 to 150 words per minute. And I know once I get going, I can hit gusts of about 200. So you can imagine your poor little hands, how they struggle to keep up with the rush of your ideas as you're typing them out. So as you reread your work, look for those little helper words that maybe accidentally got dropped off. Another common mistake I see, and not only with students who English was not their first language, anyone can do this really if you're not careful, is they incorrectly use their verbs, their action words. They don't have the correct ending on them. In this example, the narrator carefully planned and execute his crime. We didn't use our verbs correctly. Since the event happened in the past, you want to make sure that your action words reflect that. Right, it's a very easy fix. Just look at your action words and make sure they have the correct ending. The narrator carefully planned and executed his crime. Because we're talking about an event in the past, you want to add D or ED to certain words depending on what you're using. You want to be consistent with your verbs and make sure that you do this throughout your paper because this creates that nice smooth highway that your reader is going to be traveling on. You want to do this to create cohesion and polish in your work. Alright, so that's kind of the big mechanical stuff that you can find in your writing. Now let's look at some of the structural things. Here's what I'm looking for in your essays, and we're going to take this really quickly, paragraph by paragraph. So in your intro, here is your checklist of things I'll be looking for. Right, the first, very simple thing, this is the first thing I do when I grab your essays, I count paragraphs. Make sure you have at least 5. You have an intro, a conclusion, and 3 body paragraphs there. Not potty paragraphs, body paragraphs in between for a total of at least 5. Now, if you decide to go a little bit longer, if you have maybe 4 points that you want to argue in an essay, or even 5, whatever it is, just make sure each subtopic gets its own unique paragraph. But you always need at least 5. You want to make sure there's some kind of hook there that grabs a reader. And remember, you're writing for a stranger. In this case, with this first essay, you are writing for a member of the jury, right? Context. Make sure that you include the title, the author, and a brief summary of the story. You're writing for that stranger. They have no idea what it is you've just read. So you want to make sure and really spell that out for them. And finally, the very last thing in your intro paragraph should be your thesis. So after I count paragraphs, I go right for the last sentence in your intro paragraph to look for that thesis. And I need to see your topic and your treatment. What is your argument and how are you supporting it? So are you saying that the character is sane or insane, and based on what reasons? How are you going to be explaining this? All right, for your body paragraphs, you should have at least, like I just said, 3 body paragraphs in your essay where you're explaining your evidence and all that good stuff. So you need at least 3 of those. For each body paragraph, make sure that you are introducing your subtopic. So what is that paragraph going to be about? What specifically will you be taking a close look at? Provide evidence from the story. What is it the character said or did, or what happened in the story that is important enough that you want your reader to see it or hear it? And then you need to explain why those clues are important. What does it mean when the character said this? Or what is it these actions are supposed to show us? And then finally, for each of your body paragraphs, actually all of your paragraphs and all of your writing, these 3 words, you need to take that shit out of your vocabulary. Don't even use them. The words things, stuff, or etc. Don't use those words in your writing, because each one of those can stand for about a billion other nouns or verbs or adjectives. We have a really, really good language here. Let's use it. Use it to the best of your ability to paint as clear a picture as you can for your reader. Finally, when you get to your conclusion, I want you to consider these things in that final paragraph. Remember, no new ideas. Don't get to your final paragraph and be like, oh, I forgot to tell you this other thing. Don't do that, because you're going to be using this space in your essay to tie up your argument. You're going to bring it all together to a nice, satisfying close. And you can do that by rephrasing your thesis, but in a fresh way. Create some final impression for your reader. Don't just copy and paste your thesis from paragraph 1 and stick it in paragraph 5, because you just you announced it in paragraph 1 and then you spent 3 paragraphs defending it. You don't need exactly to say it again, but say it in a fresh way, just to sort of remind your reader. And again, take a look at that sample I had given you, because that writer does it pretty well. And finally, for this essay, and actually any essay you write, your concluding paragraph asks the question, so what? In other words, what should your reader do, and what should your reader believe? Those are always, you're always answering at least one of those questions for any essay that you write for the rest of your life. So in this case, do you want your reader to believe that your character is sane or insane? And then, based on what you want them to believe about your character, what do you want your reader to do about it? Send them to prison or send them to a psychiatric hospital to get some help? Right? So again, what do you want them to do, and what do you want them to believe? All right, friends. Well, there's our sort of peer review in a nutshell. You're going to do that for yourself. Again, do the best you can, do the very best you can. I know this is not a perfect process. I don't like that we're doing it this way, but this is kind of the way it's going to be. And don't worry, when I get your papers, I am going to grade them with patience and understanding and kindness, fully aware that we are all trapped in our homes and that we can only do what we can do. And I will be patient when I read your papers, don't worry. I understand there are some unusual circumstances we're trying to work around and work through. So just do your best. That's all I can ask of you. That's all you can ask of yourself. And we're going to do this. Your goal is success. My goal is your success. And we're going to do everything together to make sure that that happens, that we do that. So I hope you liked the video. I hope you got some helpful stuff out of this. I wanted you to see this first before you attempt to reread your paper and make any revisions and submit anything. And I will be in contact with you some more once we get Canvas up and running and figure out a way that you can submit your work. So We'll do this week by week. Just keep looking for messages from me, and we'll kind of find our find our footing and find our rhythm here a little bit. And it's going to be okay. We're going to make this work. So until next time, I will see you later. Bye, 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 bye.